Welcome to FO Talks. With me is Peter Isackson. He's the Chief Strategy Officer at Fair Observer. We also have Kaitlyn Diana. She is the Associate Editor at Fair Observer. Welcome, both of you. Peter, I'm just going to go right into the conversation. Tell us what are the Epstein Files and why does it matter right now?
Well, the Epstein files are something of a mystery because people are now asking the question, do they exist? It was Trump himself who said, no, there are no Epstein files, whereas Pam Bondi actually came out in February and said, they're sitting on my desk. So that's a bit of a mystery. But whatever the Epstein files are, whatever the material that people are referring to is again, a mystery in the sense that we know that a lot of documents were recovered by the FBI when, presumably, when Epstein was arrested, and then that must have been totally finalized after his death, which some people call a suicide, and other people's have other interpretations of it. But there, various people have reported that there are thousands, if not tens of thousands, of video recordings, as well as all kinds of other documents that were there in his various residences. And all that was recovered, and whether anyone has analyzed it and turned it into a dossier that you can just open and read, or whether it's just sitting there raw, waiting for somebody to do something about it. We don't know. We're waiting to find out. That's what the whole uh, debate is about, really. So at one point, we are likely to know what we mean by the Epstein files, and because there's so much pressure now to reveal something and explain something, I think there's no way that Trump and his team can avoid coming up with something and producing some material that can be called the Epstein files. Now, the other thing about the Epstein files is that whatever we know that's documented, we do have witnesses that can be called, and the first one everyone's talking about is Ghislaine Maxwell, who, according to Alan Dershowitz, knows everything. So if she can be coached to talk, we could possibly know everything. Now, whether she could be coached to talk in ways that are truthful and revelatory and at the behest of whoever's interrogating her, that's another mystery.
Well, I think we'll come back to Ghislaine Maxwell, but I want to go straight to Trump because he's now the US president. And when he was campaigning, he, he promised multiple times that he's going to make the Epstein files public, that he will take action. And now suddenly he's made this big U-turn, like always. And he's playing to his audience, or maybe he's not playing to his audience, but he certainly can't make up his mind whether the files exist and that whether he wants to make them public. And I think, Caitlin, I want to know your understanding of this because you're in Georgia, a state that swung towards Trump. And so where you're sitting right now is actually important because you can give us an understanding of what the chatter is around you about the Epstein files.
I also have a unique position as I'm in Savannah, which voted blue as like a city, and so Georgia is in a weird position too because it's slowly becoming a swing state. And I grew up in a swing state. I grew up in Virginia, so I grew up in a swing state. So it's kind of interesting. Honestly, the switch with Trump, I fully just believe it's something we've seen from him time and time again, where he just lies to his followers. He can say whatever he wants, he can do whatever he wants, and they don't really question him. So I think for him on the campaign trail, when he's advocating for releasing the Epstein files, it's because he can, and because he knows that his followers are going to really follow behind that. Him kind of being this sort of leader of a moral crusade, which is ironic considering his history of felonies. But if we're focusing on the Epstein files, they're a big deal and they have been for a very long time. As Peter said, people are convinced that Epstein was murdered by the government because they were trying to cover up the files. So there's like a lot of speculation around them. And so Trump kind of being all for the release on the campaign trail, it really felt like a strategy more than an actual policy or something, not policy, but something that he really wanted to do. And the switch is just that I think he thought he could get away with it. I mean, Trump once said that he could shoot somebody in the middle of Times Square and he wouldn't lose a follower, and he didn't. And he proved himself right, and he didn't lose a follower. I just think now what we're seeing is, and I've seen not just necessarily from the people around me in Georgia or Savannah, but even, people in the United States as a whole, like especially like on my algorithm when I see like on social media, is a lot of people are kind of coming to terms with the man that they voted for. And I think the Epstein files were something that they felt they could maybe hold over the left, because I know that the right did do a big job of playing it up and being like, oh, it's going to like destroy the Democrats. And now Trump is kind of rescinding that. And I think for a lot of people who voted for him, they were already disillusioned with him to begin with. After this most recent election, with some of his policy choices and the things that he's doing, and realizing that they're like, I didn't vote for him to do, X, Y, and Z, and he's doing X, Y, and Z, and I think it's just one of those things that's like a sort of tipping point for a lot of his voters, or not a lot of his voters, but the people who are kind of like, hey, like release the Epstein files, we want to see them. And he didn't realize that was going to be a thing. I think he thought that he could get away with lying to them because he does all the time. And it's just kind of backfiring in his face, because Epstein has been such a big thing for so many years now, and people want that resolution, and he's now refusing it after kind of championing it, in the beginning.
If I can just make a comment on something you said earlier, Kaitlyn. You said something like Trump could count on his followers to go along with him as he tells another lie. I think we have to qualify that and say he assumed that they would follow him, and he's now discovering that they're not. People like Steve Bannon and all these Charlie Kirk, all sorts of people on his side have abandoned him. One of them is, of course, Elon Musk as well, but Elon Musk was already no longer on his side. But the other thing that I would say in answer to Rohan's question is that, yes, he lied, and I agree with you, because he always lies, but I would take it a little bit further and say all politicians lie. And I have worked at one time for one of the most honest candidates in recent history of U.S. politics, and that was Jerry Brown, governor of California, elected 4 times, and he was a very moral person, but he lied too. He lied because the campaign manager of the campaign that I was working on, and there were only 4 of us. It was a very intimate crew. We had a secretary, myself. I was a student at the time, and Jerry and the candidate, Jerry, the candidate, and the campaign director, whose name was Tom Quinn, and who followed Jerry throughout his career. And Jerry was asked to say things that he didn't believe in by the campaign manager. And that's how politics works. You are told to say the things that you think will score with the public and help to get you elected. I mean, that's just a basic reality. So I find it funny when people get shocked that claim to be shocked that Trump lied. Everybody lies, but Trump is particularly egregious in the lies, and his ability to change his story. He doesn't even try to make up for it. He doesn't try to cover his tracks. So he is quite an exceptional character. But if I can just say one word about the strategy at the beginning. Yes, what you said, Kaitlyn, he was the reason anyone on the Republican side might want to make a big case out of the Epstein case is that everyone assumed that Clinton, Bill Clinton, Bill Gates, and other people associated more with the Democratic Party would be found out and exposed. And that would be terrible for the Democrats. And therefore, the Republicans felt really comfortable doing that. But of course, Trump's particular case, because he was Epstein's closest friend, was supposed to be just forgotten and left out of the picture, and it wasn't. So that was a big problem. And there's another reason they insisted in the campaigning on pushing for the release of the Epstein files, and that was Trump's campaign to take down the deep state, because Epstein, a big part of the Epstein story is his presumed connections with the intelligence world, and that's the CIA. So if Trump was the person who was going to clean out the swamp and destroy the deep state, as he promised to do, that was a big part of his rhetoric. Epstein was part of that story as well.
Well, Peter, tell us more about that. How deep do you think that swamp was, especially when it comes to the Epstein files? I mean, you've already mentioned the CIA, but were there other agencies, intelligence bureaus also involved in covering up or not covering up? Because we're not sure exactly what's in the files. So tell us more about that.
There's a lot of speculation about just basic things like, how did Epstein make so much money? Here was a guy who, I think he dropped out of college. He didn't have a degree. He was hired as a math teacher, and then various things happened along the way to turn him into a billionaire. Actually, when they assessed his fortune after his death, it was only $500 million. But he lived like someone who had more, and obviously had access to money in various forms that nobody knew about. So there's this big mystery about how he made his money, how he got his influence, and inevitably, because there were statements made by people like Alexander Acosta that he was linked to intelligence, and that's why he got a very sweetheart deal when he was accused of sexual crimes. Um, they Everyone assumed that this is, or what you can assume is that if there was a connection with intelligence, you're not going to know about it, because that's what intelligence does. It hides everything. So the hardest thing to do is to get confirmation of something like a person's connections with intelligence, because the whole system is built so that we will never know that. If you look at the 62 years that have gone by since the Kennedy assassination, we're now discovering, thanks to Congressman Luna in Florida, who has been given, and that's thanks to Trump. Trump has given her the brief of revealing everything that's been hidden about the deep state. And she began with the JFK assassination. And we've now got proof, and she says it out loud, that it was the CIA was involved in the Kennedy assassination. That we did for 62 years. We were told, no, it's Lee Harvey Oswald and nobody else. And I've spoken to CIA people who, even privately, who will say, even when you say, well, don't you have any doubts about the Warren report? No. That's the truth. That's how intelligence protects whatever it comes out with. It's not going to say, oh yeah, I'm sorry, we forgot to tell you about this, so now we'll reveal it. So I think this is going to be the most important thing And it's the biggest contradiction for Trump, because a lot of the MAGA base were really keen on knowing how he was going to dismantle the deep state. And Epstein is the symbol of that, much more than the sexual side of it. You know, people forgave Trump for the Hollywood Access tapes, where he explained how he thought about women. And it wasn't that different from what we know about Epstein's take on women. And that's coming out again with the Wall Street Journal revelation. So the sexual thing has its importance, but I think what really could bring Trump down and could have effects going further than Trump himself is the intelligence side of the Epstein affair, and linking that with what's coming out about the Kennedy the Kennedy case, or actually the two Kennedy stories, and the Martin Luther King story, and even Malcolm X. They're all linked. We're beginning to learn the history of the period where I grew up in the 60s, which is really interesting for me.
Well, Peter, you said that intelligence protects, and I want to maybe poke you a little bit further on this. How do you think? Do you think Epstein was protected by the intelligence?
Of
And
course,
if it was, like, why? How did they fail then to keep it covered up? Like, where do you think it all collapsed?
no, they've succeeded. It has been effectively covered up. Well, all we have the testimony which was reported by Clara Ward, the journalist, who did a lot of reporting on Epstein. She said that she got testimony from one of the people who vetted Alexander Acosta when he was nominated as Secretary of Labor in the first Trump administration. And the question, somebody came up with the question, because Acosta was the one who gave Epstein the sweetheart deal. So quite logically, the Republicans wanted to know what that was all about, because they feared that it could be used against Trump and against Acosta himself. The fact that he was complicit in covering up a sex offender, and the story he gave, which was reported indirectly. So we can't say that we have the testimony, on a piece of paper. Or it's simply what a reporter reported after speaking to someone who, and I don't think the name of the person was identified, but what happened when they asked him, how did you end up giving Epstein that gift of a 13-month sentence where he was free to work, to go out and go home every day. And his answer was, "Well, he belongs. I was told he belongs to intelligence. Which intelligence? Nobody says. He belongs to intelligence." And he said that was above my pay grade. So you can understand that a prosecutor gets orders from on high, and we don't know where those orders came from, and he's not going to upset the apple cart. He's not going to reveal anything, and he's just going to do his job. So that's the basic information. But there's more. There's much more. We know, and the key to this, I think, the reason why people are taking this seriously is not Epstein himself, but Ghislaine Maxwell, because her father was everyone knows or can, and again, this has been covered up. There is no direct proof of it, but there's so much evidence that Robert Maxwell, who died mysteriously, just like Epstein, nobody knows what it was declared a suicide, like Epstein. But Robert Maxwell was closely tied to, meaning that he had a working relationship with the Mossad. And it's assumed that, and we know that the Mossad and CIA, MI6 cooperate in a lot of different ways. It's assumed that if Epstein was, and we know his relations with Israel as well. But all this, I don't want to go into it and make a case for it. But all these things are present and have fueled speculation that Epstein was working with CIA, which doesn't mean he was a direct asset of CIA. There are various ways of cooperating with intelligence agencies, and there's an assumption that there was a connection with Mossad, partly because of Robert Maxwell, and the assumption that Ghislaine Maxwell obviously knew about that and had her own complicity in it. But again, I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm just saying there's a lot of storyline to explore there, and there are a lot of people exploring it.
Right, right. And I think this is only it's going to take a lot more time for everything to be dug out, but we still are making headway. And I mean, Americans are really, really not liking how this is playing out because if you just look at the MAGA movement, the Make America Great Again movement, they are split, they are torn. They have one side is calling for the files to be released, and the other side is backing Trump now. So this unified movement that we had seen during the election campaign, because well, Trump was lying that he's going to reveal the files. Well, they're now confused. They don't know which side to take. Kaitlyn, what do you think is going to happen with the movement? Do you think it's going to splinter and fall off?
It it's really hard to tell because, like I said, a lot of people have recently, more and more of like his supporters, his constituents have kind of realized that he's the president the left said they were voting for. I think is a really good way of putting it because so much of his criticism, like people like MAGA people love to just be like, oh, it's fake news, it's the leftist propaganda, it's this woke agenda, and I think for a lot of, or at least for the people who are calling for the release of the Epstein files, and it's like I said earlier, bigger than just the Epstein files. And I think Peter's right too. Like the sexual stuff is not the important part because if it were, Trump is once again so many sexual assault charges. That's not the thing that people are upset about. And I think for a lot of people who still support him, I think that's the part that they're focusing on is that sexual assault aspect where they just try to sweep that under the rug and be like, well, Trump, just because he was friends with Epstein doesn't mean, that he's on that list. And, he said something nice about Epstein like 20 years ago. That doesn't mean that they're friends now or that he defends him. And I watched a video. I don't know if you guys have ever seen any of the Jubilee videos, but they have one that came out with Mehdi Hassan, who is a progressive journalist, debating 20 conservatives, quote unquote. One of them proudly said he was a fascist in the interview.
Didn't one say that he was a Native American?
Yeah, he said that white people were Native Americans. He did, yes. So yeah,
I've seen
it's
that.
it's a painful watch. If you can stomach seeing any of the clips of it, it's been all over my social media. But one of the clips I saw earlier was somebody adamantly defending Trump in regards to Epstein, and it was about Trump being pro-crime. But I'm not going to go into that side of the argument. But the way that their brains kind of operate, and it's interesting to kind of watch them do like the cognitive dissonance, like deflecting, trying to like shift the blame off of Trump in any way that they can. So it is really hard to say how it will turn out because you do have his disillusioned, constituents who are kind of realizing that Trump is not who they believed he was for all this time, even though everyone's been telling him that's not who he is. But then you have the people who will call Trump out and say that, oh, like I don't support that, and then later come back and still adamantly support Trump because they somehow manage to always kind of rewrite it in their brain. And it's interesting because it's really hard to tell how they'll react because they're so used to defending him against everything. And I think that's still going to stick. I would hope that this would be a very big awakening. But once again, Trump has a long history of doing things that are, egregious, as Peter said, which is the word that I was also going to use. And it's just hard to see which way, it's going to split, if it's going to be a 50-50 split, or if it's going to be, you have the people who are calling for the release of the files who are then going to back Trump if they get released, or, fall back into place. It's just hard to really predict because they're unpredictable people.
Yeah, I think there is a major change in the landscape. MAGA is split, and what that means is there are a lot of people who have an institutional reason for sticking with Trump and supporting him, and even someone like Tulsi Gabbard, who was humiliated by Trump, and who is responsible for intelligence. So if there's somebody who's going to investigate the intelligence side of it, and has the personality to want to do something about it, that would be Tulsi Gabbard in the team. But she's got to hew to the to the discipline of the team. The problem is Trump is a populist leader. He won on the basis of stirring up emotion amongst a lot of the populace, and if that breaks in two, if he loses the populist side of it, if people say they if they no longer believe in his ability to carry out their populist desires, he's going to have a real problem. And the problem will begin to emerge in the midterm elections, obviously. The Republicans will have to decide, where are they in terms of this whole history of a populist movement that is now breaking, that's now fragmenting. And it was already uncomfortable for most Republicans who were, the majority of Republicans in the previous elections were, going back to 2016, were establishment Republicans. They didn't like Trump. They didn't expect Trump to win. And they thought, just stay with the stable boat we've got. And even if we don't win this election, we can win the next one, but Trump will disappear. Well, Trump didn't disappear because of the populism. And if that populism is fragmented, the Republicans will be faced with a new dilemma. Are we with Trump? Are we against him? And is he the face of the party or not? So that's going to be a big mystery. But I think there's even a greater mystery, and that is we've seen Elon Musk break away, but that was not because of Epstein. And if Musk is talking about it now, it's because he's already broken away. He says he's going to create a third party. But Trump is losing some of the key support he had, which built his image of the person who could bring all kinds of things together, including Silicon Valley. And that is going to trouble a lot of people. And I think there are a lot of things going on in the background within the Republican Party. And even, there are rumors that J.D. Vance is now preparing to become president. And maybe even encourage, as some people are saying, he may be working with Rupert Murdoch, to make sure that Trump is totally humiliated to the point where he could be impeached or forced to resign. Now, nobody's saying that's stuff in the deep background for the moment. But this is a really interesting situation.
Yeah, Peter, I actually want to talk about that because we've mentioned Elon Musk twice now, and sitting in India, I read it as a really big deal, and I'll tell you why. Because When the campaigning was going on, Elon Musk clearly played a vital role in it. He was on stage, he was hugging Trump, he was rooting for him like a cheerleader. And
Well, he
then,
gave him $100 million or
yes,
more.
he gave a lot of money to Trump and the campaign. And now it's been just six to 7 months, and they've completely broken off, and their falling out has been public. It's been like two teenagers breaking up, and now suddenly you see Musk going at it on X, which was formerly Twitter, and I mean it's the platform that he owns, but he's putting out tweets every day about the releasing and calling for the release for the Epstein files. Like, do you think he's got a power play hidden, or do you think he just wants to put Trump in a bad spotlight?
Well, my opinion is that I'm not at all surprised, given the personalities of these two men, that that would happen. And we saw stories like that with in the first Trump administration, where key people left. I mean, one of them, uh, I can't remember the Italian guy who was with Trump for 11 days. Um, his name escapes me. Sorry, but I mean there were other cases, even big important people like Tillerson and Mike Pompeo and John Bolton, who was really the voice of Trump's foreign policy, and then was rejected. Um, and then these people write books about Trump, about what a terrible person. So there's nothing new about that. But with Musk is an oversized personality, so it has more weight than when it's John Bolton or someone like that. Um, that doesn't surprise me. But Musk is, I think, we've seen another phenomenon is that Musk who stayed away from politics completely. Everyone assumed he was a Democrat for a long time. Uh, I think he's acquired a taste for being a political manipulator, and he's going to pursue that in any way he can. Now, I don't think he'll succeed, but he's got the money to play around with it. I don't know, Kaitlyn. What's your take on
I
this?
kind of agree. And you saying that like someone has a taste for being a political manipulator, it kind of I had a thought where I was like, he's like the modern day Rasputin, you know? It's he's like in the government and I think
Rasputin was loyal.
um, I think the thing that's interesting about Elon, especially with Trump and like this whole breakup, is that a lot of the people who support Elon because he was so a part of Trump's campaign and the people who support Trump, it's essentially a circle more than it is a Venn diagram. And I think this is a real opportunity for Elon Musk to take the people who are disillusioned with Trump and to like if he champions himself as the one who kind of like helps take Trump down in that way, or at least like gain some of his influence from the people who now are like, oh, if the Epstein files come out and if Trump is in them, and the people who are against him or against him being in the files or the files in general, like if they really do like say like this is it for me and Trump, like I no longer support him. Elon is right there, and he still gives them the platform in the way that Trump did to like express their views. And I think that it's a very it does feel like a power play. It feels like a way to cement like his cult of personality, sort of, in a way that Trump has. And I think it really is about getting Trump's influence for himself and like the constituents and the people who do support him. Because, like I said, it's essentially more of a circle than a Venn diagram. And then like you said, they had their high school breakup, and now it's kind of a bit more of a split. And I think this is a chance for Elon to really like grab that power for himself.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think Musk is in any way credible as a political voice, as a political figure?
I
I
like
mean, Trump is only half. Trump succeeded
Mm-hmm.
He was just a television celebrity and a real estate
Mm-hmm.
mogul. Uh, Elon is just, but Trump had connections with politicians in the past and did do odd things, including contesting the birth certificate of Obama, which put
Mm-hmm.
him in politics. But Musk just, it's only with Trump that he's
Mm-hmm.
appeared to have any connection with politics. And is there any way that Americans can take seriously the idea that he has a political program or a political ideology that can serve a purpose?
I think, like, for most Americans, I don't want to say most Americans, but I feel like for a lot of people who are on the left and, people who are already very anti-Trump, like, I don't think they think Elon Musk, like, they do not want him to be in a position of power. They aren't going to be the ones supporting him. But I do think, I mean, Elon's kind of rise to power, I guess we can call it, especially like within politics, seemed like very just like sudden. Like one day he was there and then he was there. And I think this could be his in. And I do think that, and I mean, look at Trump. He's been elected a second time. He's ran for president 3 times. And there are people who genuinely want to cement Trump as a forever leader, for as long as he can, lead and serve, which is debatable considering, he's already like almost 80 years old. So like at what point are you able to like stop serving? And so I think that as much as I want to say no, there are people who would say yes and who do believe that Elon could really be like a figure in that way. And like we've seen that politics and the people within politics are becoming less politicians to be. I mean, look at Trump. And so it is very kind of, it's a little scary because I honestly believe that, yes, I do think he has a chance of becoming an active voice in politics because I think there are people who will listen to him. And it's just
But
a matter of,
does he have a discourse that's political? I've never heard anything coming from you. But I'm not in the U.S., so I
Mhm.
don't hear what
I
he's
think,
saying all.
Yeah,
yeah,
actually,
well,
I want to double down on that because I mean, we've heard policy from Elon
mhm.
Musk. We've heard him talking about solutions, but politics is more than that. It's
Mhm.
more than delivering a product. It's about getting people to buy into an idea and to stay with it. Does Elon Musk have those ideas? I think that's something everybody wants to know.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know if he has like fully cemented ideas in that regard. Now, I don't tend to like to listen to him speak that often. So a lot of the information I do get about Elon and Trump, it is very, like I see the sources and everything, but I don't try to like fully engage with him because I don't really believe in giving like those views, like really like hard, like right, like fascist or like neo-Nazi views, like a platform, and helping to spread those voices. But I do think that his right now his ideology is very aligned with like Trump, but I think that's just because he aligned himself with Trump. And it is hard to say who is Elon Musk when Elon Musk is not kind of attached to Trump's hip because so far, even when he's not a supporter of Trump, it's all about Trump. He's constantly tweeting about him, he's constantly talking about him. It is very, I haven't heard anything necessarily in terms of his full ideology or like what he firmly believes, but like I said, I think he right now is kind of representative of the same ideas that Trump kind of upholds. It's just that like these Epstein files and their breakup are kind of like where this like divergence occurred. And I think that him even being associated with Trump and his ideas in any capacity is enough for people to like people who agree with Trump to then agree with I mean, like there's the whole thing where people were debating whether or not he did the Nazi salute on TV, which I think goes to show what his ideas and his ideals are. So I don't say it's fully cemented, but I do think there are hints of it there, and you can kind of assume what he believes in and what his ideology is. And then I think if Trump really does fall, in big air quotes, um, this is like a place for like Elon to like fully kind of step into play here. So I think it's more like an opening than like he's fully established himself, if that makes sense.
I profoundly disagree. Only not because what you're saying isn't true, but because I don't see which way he could go. He cannot take over the Trump movement. That's out of the question now. He cannot succeed with a third party simply because nobody can succeed. And the person who did the best job with that was Ross Perot. And he did it in a fairly rational way. But I don't see Musk being not that Americans require rationality. We know that's not the case, but uh, but Musk is so far out. It's so undefined in terms of what he can propose, and that's the point I was trying to make earlier. And Rohan seems to agree with that. Now you seem to say it doesn't matter if you're far out, or far off base, or just dispersed to the four corners of the political spectrum. Um, there, it boggles my mind to think that could happen. But let me say one thing, because of my long history. I thought the same thing about Reagan in 1980, and I remember reading in Private Eye, who were during the campaign. I didn't believe that uh, a Hollywood character like Reagan could ever get elected, that people would consider him to be presidential. And I remember reading in Private Eye, who were developing a satirical take on the election campaign. They started calling Reagan Rockfist Rogan. And when he was actually nominated at the convention, Private Eye in the UK. I was in the UK at the time. Um, uh, Private Eye wrote in the mock Times series, Times political commentary. Um, it is believed to be the first time in the history of American politics that a cartoon character has been nominated by one of the major parties. That was the lead of the article. And so for me, Private Eye had hit the nail on the head. Reagan was a cartoon character. He was a creation of Hollywood. And yet he became a president and now is considered to be a saint, a political saint. So anything can happen. You're right.
That's kind of the point too. Is like I don't I if we lived in a like perfect ideal world, like, and American politics wasn't at the state it was at now, I would love to say that no, Elon doesn't have a chance. But I think if he really does just establish himself and like fully um, creates this idea, his ideology, and what he stands for, I think that if he did do that, that there is a chance that people would follow him, because American politics is really unpredictable now. And even like think about Trump, I remember when he first ran for office, like videos were surfacing of him saying that if he ever ran for president, he would run as a Republican because, they're easy to dupe, or, something along those lines. But he also, used to hold different views. And so like Trump himself has also been a character who has kind of been all over the place. And then he found that kind of like cult of personality and like the perfect group to market himself to. And it's worked wonderfully for him. And so I think that Elon could honestly uh, do the same things, and it would probably be successful for him as well. And I would love to say that that's not a possibility, but like as you said, it's American politics is very unpredictable, and it just becomes more and more unpredictable the older I get. I mean, I was born in 2001. Okay, so I was born 4 months before 9/11. American politics for me growing up has very much, from Bush to Obama to Trump. I was 15 when he got elected the first time, and my first election that I could vote in was 2020. And so politics for me has been a very different experience because it's kind of this very back and forth, like blind sort of party loyalty and very hard like divisions. and just like I said, unpredictability. It's just very all over the place. So it is. I could see it happening because I've seen a very kind of volatile system currently being, explored in the United States.
Do you think he can do it with a third party, or do
I
you see it?
honestly, I don't think he could do it with a third party. I think it would have to be him running under the under the Republicans. Like I think he would have to run as a Republican candidate. Like that is the only way I could see him truly garnering enough influence to get into power, like in that way, if he really, really wanted to. But I don't think he could win with a third party. No.
So that there I would raise another objection, and that is he will not be accepted by the Trumpists because he's broken
Mm-hmm.
with Trump, and he certainly won't be accepted by the establishment
Mm-hmm.
Republicans. Well, I say certainly. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah,
I would
it's yeah.
imagine he's not. He's not the kind of. He's not a Ron DeSantis. He's not a Jeb Bush. He's not. The establishment is going to stick to itself. Maybe a Ramaswamy could 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 be in there. Maybe Ramaswamy would choose Elon Musk as his vice president,
Mm-hmm.
something
Yeah.
like that, or the contrary. So Musk could. Well, I don't know. Yeah, I don't want to speculate.
Yeah, I don't know if I see Elon running, and even if he did, I don't think it would be like a very quick and like like immediately after Trump we have Elon. I do think if he were to consolidate power in that regard and like try to work his way into the Republican Party and like eventually run for president, I think it would take a little while, but I think that he could work his way there. I do think that that is a very potential like outcome, but like not in the immediate future. It would be years, but I think it's something that could potentially happen. Yes.
I just want to butt in here. Can Elon run for president? Does he meet the criteria because he's born in South Africa?
Oh,
I mean
that's
that
right.
is, but don't you have
That's
to
right.
be an American citizen for a certain number of years, or do you have to
No,
be born? And you have
you
to
have
be
to
born
be
in the United
natural
States.
born
Yeah,
citizen.
yeah,
That's
that's true.
that's
So
why
yeah, he can't
George.
even run for president. And like that's I don't know if Elon would necessarily run for president, but I think there are other ways to consolidate power that aren't necessarily like the presidency or even like necessarily like obviously like government is the one who makes the laws, but we see that he held like considerable influence even not being like a political leader in that regard. So I think there are still ways for him to like gain influence and power and be a figurehead without being like in the government in the way of like he is a representative of some kind or he is a congressman or a president or a vice president.
But there is a question in the background,
Mm-hmm.
which the Musk's nationality raises, and that is that we're talking about something that's literally written into the Constitution. Um, is there a chance that the Constitution can be changed? That there could be a new Constitution?
And I
Because
mean,
we are. Trump has led us into a constitutional crisis, into a state of permanent constitutional crisis. Uh, I don't. I think it's difficult to imagine the United States changing its constitution. I live in a country in France, which has changed its constitution 5 times
well,
in
I
the
will
last.
say the American Constitution technically does change because we do amend it, so it could very well just be some sort of amendment. I mean, like that's what we do every time every amendment is a change to the Constitution. So there is a real possibility that like he could do. I mean, like isn't party limits? That was Jefferson the 2-term limit. And he added that, and then like even the Bill of Rights, it's an amendment to the Constitution. The first, second, third, those are amendments to the Constitution. So I think there's a real possibility for that happening if that is the direction they wanted to go, like in terms of changing the Constitution. But I also think that the Constitution, it's an interesting document now because back to that Jubilee video, the one I think it was the one who claimed to be a fascist, said that he loves that Trump is very anti-Constitution, but then also says that he stands for the Second Amendment. And so it's interesting because people like to cherry pick the Constitution. And I don't know if they if the vehicle for which they would choose to do that is the Constitution, because it's very much a pick and choose of like, well, I like this amendment, but I don't really like any of the other ones that don't, benefit the dominating class. So I don't know, because I think if they did make that amendment to the U.S. Constitution, then there's, Elon is not the only immigrant in this country, and it opens the door for anyone who is not born in the United States. And I think a lot of people who are very anti-immigration, which is, a big policy of Trump's, they wouldn't go for it. So I don't really see that being an amendment to the Constitution via Trump in any capacity, but it's not out of the picture that that amendment could be made, because the Constitution was made to be amended.
I think that's a conversation for another day. I want to get back to the Epstein files, and because we've spoken heavily about Trump and what on the lies that he's spoken about, we've extensively spoken about Elon Musk. There's one part of the political spectrum that I really want to know about: the Democrats. Trump saw the Epstein files as a way to put pressure on them, to put them on the back foot, and this was, I would say, 6 to 8 months ago. Now, how are the Democrats looking at this situation? Do you think they're smirking and thinking that Trump just shot himself in the foot because MAGA is split? Or do you think they're worried that maybe, Trump could be crazy and one day he just goes ahead with whatever the Epstein files are about? I want to know from both of you, like, how do you think the Democrats are reading this?
Okay, I would say they, I mean, politicians are always opportunistic. They're going to look for opportunities, and the only opportunities they're ever focused on is the next election. So, yes, the splitting of the MAGA movement is important for them to understand that's a weakness they will take every opportunity to exploit. But I think we're seeing a return to this permanent obsession since 2015 of turning Trump into an outsized villain. And this because of his association with Epstein. And that brings us back not to the spying side of it, but to the sexual side. Uh, so the Democrats thought they had won the election in 2016 when the revelations about the Hollywood Access tape occurred. Well, we now know that he's a sexual aggressor. I mean, we know by his own testimony because it was his voice that said it. That didn't change anything. He was elected, although he was elected not with a majority, but not with a popular majority, but he was elected. And I think now the Democrats have just developed this reflex. Anything we can do to impeach Trump is worthwhile, and we have to go ahead with that because he is the symbol of everything that isn't the Democratic Party. And the Republicans can be split. And they were already split. Trump had already split the Republican Party in two. Now his movement is being split in two. So Democrats are very pleased with the way things are going, and you can count on them to. That's one of the forces. I mean, what's interesting about the situation is Trump has to deal with his own dissidents, like Steve Bannon or Elon Musk. But he also has to deal with the fact that the Democrats now see a major opportunity, and they appear to be just pushing for something that's morally correct, and they're willing to sacrifice Clinton because that was the big obstacle, really. The Democrats, in fact, the Republicans and the Trumpists are saying it now. Well, if this was all true about Epstein and Trump and all that, why didn't the Democrats during the Biden years uh, dig it all out and throw it, in front of the public and discredit Trump, which they could have done because they had all this information. So that's why Trump says it's a hoax, because that proves that they didn't have anything on Trump. But
Peter, just a second. I want you to talk more about what you mean by sacrificing Clinton.
well, uh, the if the obstacle for the Biden administration for bringing out things about Epstein was that would expose Clinton as a major offender and as a major accomplice of whatever Epstein was up to, then that was too dear a price to pay for exposing Epstein. But now, exposing Epstein is the way of bringing down Trump. And but there's the risk. It's a parallel risk to the one that Trump had, and that is that Clinton will be one of the victims. That he will be exposed as a nefarious character, and but they can sacrifice. They couldn't sacrifice Clinton earlier because he was a pillar of the party, and then it was Hillary who represented the the core of the Democratic Party, and as even beyond 2016, which there was talk about her running again later. So the Clinton dynasty was a pillar of the democratic image that it built of itself. But now Clinton's 80, he'll be 80 years old next year. Uh, Hillary is no longer part of the landscape. I mean, she's not an active person in politics. So to get Trump, it may be worthwhile going after Epstein, getting the files out, and learning that Clinton has to go with alongside Trump in the dustbin. Yeah.
I honestly really I agree with Peter that the Democrats are like going to use any opportunity they can to get rid of Trump. And I also agree that they are willing to sacrifice the people that they need to sacrifice in order to make that happen. I think um, that there are going to be Democrats on that list. I think that there's definitely going to be people, not just Clinton, but other people who are going to be on that list. And there's going to be a sort of like spiderweb effect. Um, my roommate and I were discussing this last night, actually, and she was the one who kind of put it that way. But like the spiderweb effect of people kind of like connected to people who are connected to Epstein, either like, they are complacent or they, like even if they're not on the list themselves, there's like cover ups and there's complacency and there are things like that. So I think it's going to be a very big thing. But I think, like Peter said, the Democrats are willing to do so in order to get rid of Trump, who is to them, like Peter said, the figurehead, the face of like everything that opposes the Democrats and like the left and things. So I agree that I think they're willing to shoot themselves in the foot if they have to a little, to get Trump out of office, because for them, Trump
It's,
is
it's
getting
shooting
rid of him is the big win.
it's shooting a toe off
Yeah,
and keeping the foot. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, no, I
Actually,
agree with Peter.
yeah.
All right, we're running out of time, but I have one final question for the both of you, and this is for our global audiences. Let's take, for example, that the Epstein files are made public tomorrow. Um, what do you think is going to happen? Who do you think is going to be on that list? And this is all speculation. Nobody really knows because nobody's really seen them. But we just want to know about what you think, or who do you think would be on that list, and would this be the biggest political controversy America has ever seen? Kate, maybe we
Well,
can start with you, and then we can
Yeah,
finish with Peter.
yeah. Okay. So I do think that it is going to be a very. There's no way I see this playing out that isn't kind of a really, really big scandal. Do I think it's going to be the biggest one in history? I don't necessarily know, but I do think it'll be up there. And I also kind of speculate that people like obviously politicians, big tech, like billionaires, media moguls, things like that, like they're all going to kind of be affected. But I also think people that we aren't thinking about, Hollywood. Hollywood and the government are actually really closely aligned. Think about Diddy, think about R. Kelly, think about, all of those like scandals that are going on in Hollywood. And I firmly believe that when those files come out, it is going to be a hit not just on the government, but on like the entertainment industry and Hollywood in general. And it's gonna have so many more like widespread effects than just like Democrats or Republicans or, anyone else in the middle. It's gonna be once again that spiderweb effect of, this celebrity was, friends with Epstein or was friends with somebody who was friends with Epstein, but then kind of like was, in on it. And I just think that I do think it's going to be a really big scandal. I do think it's going to cause a lot of shockwaves, but I think it isn't just going to be political. I think it's going to be on a more like societal, like level of just kind of imploding in so many different areas. Like I firmly believe that a lot of people in Hollywood are going to be on that list, or at least in some way, shape, or form associated with the people on that list. And I think that's an unintended consequence that we don't really talk about or think about, but I genuinely believe that it's going to be pretty big.
I think it'll reveal something much more fundamental, and that will be the real shock. And that is that there is a club, there's an elite. We knew that there's a financial elite, there's a political elite, there's circles of influence and that kind of thing. But these are people who frequent each other, despite ideological differences or cultural differences. And it's a big club. And when you see all these members, including Hollywood, but also Wall Street and Silicon Valley and all sorts of things, it it actually demonstrates things that satirists like George Carlin have long been joking about, and that there's a big club out there and you're not in it. That was his big line, and they don't care about you, but they do care about their private pleasures, and they do share them, and this is something that people could suspect is probably true in some way because everyone has friends, everyone has ways of socializing. But if it comes out in such a systematic way, where you see how all these people who shouldn't have been aligned in many different ways were quite willing to associate intimately, frequently, and intensively, and that they were all willing to compromise any principles they had, whether they were, whether they were private moral principles or public uh, belief in public values and that kind of thing. Uh, that could be a real shock for American society as a whole, and not just those who don't like those people, who suddenly will have people to blame that they feel uncomfortable with. But this is a whole crowd, and it's an entire structure. Uh, and if that becomes visible, that really changes the way people think about their country. So I think that's the big thing. And I think the other big thing, and I insist on this, is unless the intelligence services are really good at keeping everything hidden, um, that's going to have a big effect as well. When we discover not many people are interested in foreign policy in the U.S. They don't vote on foreign policy, but this is about international relations as well, and it's about war. It's about overthrowing governments. So all kinds of things that have been carefully hidden. So there's a lot that can come out. Now, whether it will come out, I mean, obviously people will, in all these sectors, will do everything they can to protect it, and they'll probably collude to do so. So will we get it? I don't know. But there are so many openings now. There's a breach in the system. And one of the factors in that breach is the person I mentioned, Congresswoman Luna, who's who's still pushing. I mean, a week ago, she was saying in public that she's now already released serious elements of the JFK file, which make her believe that it was a conspiracy. I mean, not only believe it, to assert that it was a conspiracy and that the CIA was involved. But she's also got in her brief, she's got the three other cases: RFK, MLK, and Malcolm X, plus Epstein as well. So she's got the five cases that people identified with, or that Trump identified with, the secrets to the deep state. So that's now there will be a lot of pressure in both directions. People wanting it to come out and people making sure that it doesn't come out. So that's going to be a game we're going to have to observe.
Thank you, Peter and Kaitlyn. That was a really engaging conversation, and I'm pretty sure we might have to do this one more time because this is still developing, and there's still a lot of interest in this. And I mean, you never know what's going to happen with the Epstein files because it's not going anywhere for now.
Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
thank you.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.